G'day everyone and welcome. Today we're going to have a look at making some miniature concrete barriers out of foam board and glue. It's a really simple project which you can make out of just some scraps you've got laying around. One thing I did notice when going through my scraps for this project was I actually have a couple of different thicknesses of foam board in my cupboards. So for this project I actually am using the thinner foam board that I've got, but you might just want to take that into account. As you're building, if you've got the thicker foam board, you might just want to change the dimensions a little bit to make them just a little bit bigger. You might find it's a bit harder to get the same angles with the thicker foam board. So I'm going to be using this. Now we're going to cut this down. All we're going to need is our trusty craft knife, mechanical pencil, and I've got a pen there as well, and our PVA wood glue to hold it all together. The last thing I'm going to do is hit it with some black Mod Podge and black paint there. It's got a bit of water mixed in as well. Now for this paint job, you can see on these ones I've just used simple craft paints. You could certainly make these a lot better, and I'm sure there's a lot of tutorials out there on how to paint a realistic concrete effect to get something better than what I've got. But you can use those three simple colours to get the effect that I did, if that's all you're looking for. Now for this foam board, we're just going to cut it down into 3 pieces for each barrier. Now I cut these to about 3/4 of an inch by 3 inches. Again, for this thickness of foam, those dimensions worked out quite well for me. The one thing you do want to make sure you've got with these, they don't have to be too accurate, but you want to make sure that your 2 standing pieces are about the same width, just so that they meet at the top and they have the same angle on each side when you glue them together. Now the one thing we will need to do here as well, which I've done on mine, you can see on the bottom here I've got this chamfered edge, so this slight angle along the bottom base piece. Now I don't have a hot wire foam cutter or anything fancy to do that, but I have worked out that this works alright for me. It's a bit hard to show on the camera for you, but I'll show you here just how I cut these angles to get them reasonably accurate. They don't have to be perfect, but again there I'm just making sure that those 2 uprights are going to be the same width. Now for this you definitely want to have a sharp blade in your craft knife, and what we're going to do is we're just going to put it at a slight angle. So whatever angle you think you want on this, it's probably about 45 there I guess. Now what you want to do is just drag your blade down. If it's nice and sharp it should cut through here no problem, but you just want to try and keep that line the same width all the way down the top of that piece of foam. Now if you're keeping your hand at the same angle all the way, and you're keeping that line and that thickness of offcut about the same, what you should end up with is a reasonably straight line at the end. Again, if you've got better tools than this, such as a hot wire foam cutter or something, there might be a lot easier way to make these barriers without even having to go to do all this glue up and cutting, but this is what I've got to work with and I've found it works quite well. So once you've got those edges cut, we'll just sit these back on and I'll show you how they're going to line up and glue. Now the edges don't matter too much if things aren't the same length exactly. It's not a big problem. We're going to be breaking most of that off anyway. But once you've got that nice angled base, we'll be able to just glue these straight on. So I'll crack on and get this second one done. And I'll be right back with both of these ready to glue. Now when you're gluing these up, I am using PVA glue instead of hot glue here. Gives me a bit more time to move all the pieces around, which you will definitely need to do. These are a bit delicate and hard to get exactly right, so I found the PVA glue, whilst it makes everything really delicate and fragile as you're moving it around, it's the best way I found to go. So I actually do 2 steps of glue up here. I'll glue the base, and then I'll put one nice bead of glue across the top here to meet these up, and I'll put them down on there. When you do put them down onto your base, what you're trying to get is you don't want the top pieces overhanging that angle that we cut, and you also probably don't want too much of a ledge on that bottom bit there. So as you can see, this is still very fragile, and if I pick it up the wrong way, it's definitely going to fall apart. But all we need to do here is get our little angles right. So we don't want one upright standing straight up and down and the other one on an angle. Try and get them as even as possible. And once you've got them lined up with the sides of your base, like I said, you don't want anything overhanging or too much of a ledge down the bottom. Just be very careful here and move it around as you need to. What we're going to do is get it about right, as close to right as we can get it in this first step, and then we're just going to put it aside. So what you might find is it might be easier to use a pen or your craft knife or something to move these pieces around on the base, as you see I do here. Just want to get them about even. Like I said, it's not too critical, because what we're going to do is just put these to the side, and we're going to come back in about 10 minutes, or 5 or 10 minutes or so. Now these are definitely not very strong at all, so that glue's still really wet, but we do have a moment here where we can probably force this if we needed to adjust something. If something didn't glue down right or at the right angle, we can probably move it around, but these two I've got here look okay. So all I'm going to do is add a bead of glue to the top. Not a huge dollop, as you can see, just enough to run it right across there. Any gaps you might see in the bottom here, probably run a bead of glue on there. It certainly doesn't hurt. You don't want to coat the entire thing with PVA glue at this point, but you don't have to be too neat with it either. Just filling in the gaps here on this side. You'll actually notice they're not too bad, so I don't have to do too much with these ones. Now once we've got this glue in place, we're actually going to leave them to dry for maybe an hour or so, depending on the dry time of your glue. But we want to actually let this set pretty well so that we can actually handle them and start put some detail on there without risking any breakages at all. So the second one here was pretty good, so I didn't need to do too much. Just a quick bead of glue across the top, and as I said, I'm going to leave those now to dry for about an hour or so, until it's mostly all dried. You see the top there is definitely dried. Bit of white glue still showing on the sides, but these are definitely ready to start working with. As long as they're not going to push apart or break the glue anywhere, make sure you've got it, everything on there pretty tightly, because it's this next step we are going to start handling this pretty rough. So what we're going to do is start chipping away on these ends. So we just like to have a bit of rubble on the end. I just find it may not be accurate, but it looks a lot better, especially given that we're working with very basic materials. So you can use a craft knife. I just find picking away at this with your fingers is quite good. Now definitely save these little chips that you're breaking off as you go. We're going to use those to fill those gaps in a few minutes. So I'll speed this up. So you're just getting the basic shape on the ends here. I'll speed this up so you don't have to watch me pick away at these for the next 15 minutes. But all you're going to do here is just get these just shaped back a little bit. Around the top you'll notice the glue that's dried is going to be harder to pick at, so just be very careful that you don't peel all that off. Once you get towards the end here, I just try to remove any of the sharp edges you might have on that rubble concrete that we've peeled, so just so that it's sort of breaking back along that concrete face. So once you've got those shapes basically what you want. So we're just working on the ends at the moment. Don't worry too much about those details through the middle. We'll come back to those, but once you got your shapes about right, fine tune it to what you need. We're going to fill in these gaps now, and that's where all these little pieces of foam that we've been chipping away with are going to come in handy. You want these to probably be the smaller the better, to get these in there, but you'll find if you just start picking it up and putting it in, you'll be able to pick them out and put them in as you need to. It's a bit messy, this part of the process, but works really well, and it gives a really good effect on the end of these concrete barriers. So I'm pretty liberal with the glue there. I'm not forcing it all the way in, but definitely put a good couple of drips on the end and try to get it to sort of seep into that crack on the end. And what we're going to do is get some of those foam chips and start putting them into that glue. So again, these are quite dry now, so the glue up on all of these has probably been almost an hour and a half that these main frames have been drying, so I can push these around a little bit without risking breaking them, so keep that in mind. Don't start too early on this part of the process. All I'm doing here is just finding the right couple of little bits of foam to start wedging into that crack. You can force them in a bit. If you push them in too far, don't worry too much. All you got to do is add some more glue and do it again. But yeah, try not to push them all the way in. You'll just end up wasting glue and chips of foam here. So once you've got the first lot in there, just go back over it and double check that everything is looking pretty good. If you've got any holes that are showing through, definitely add some more glue. I've added a bit of glue on all the ends after the first stage, just to put a little bit more in there, and it does double, it helps me to check that it's not going to have any holes or anything like that. You don't want any of these pieces really hanging out, so just make sure when you're pushing them in there you don't have too many overhangs with that foam. And then leave those to dry. Again, I've probably left them for about half an hour or so. They're not fully dry at all, but you can certainly touch those without getting glue all over yourself. The next part of the process, we're going to be working on the main faces of these barriers, so we'll be steering clear of these ends for the time being, so just be a bit careful with them and you should be right. So the next thing we're going to need is our craft knife. We're going to put some craters in the faces of these concrete barriers. Now the best way I found to do this was just to stick your knife in there and try to chip up a little bit. You don't want to get any straight cuts or anything like that, so it's best to just try and jam the end of the knife in and just try to peel some up, and then just get your fingers and get those edges or any bits that are peeling. So this is just a taste. However much you want to put in there, or however you want to make these little craters look, is up to you. Just be very careful you don't go right through your foam. You don't want to put holes into the middle. That will probably detract from the effect at the end. If you want to put some grooves in the top of these, just remember we've put that glue across there as well, so it's going to be hard to get through. It won't be easy to chip, so you might have to cut into that. When you do that, just remember to go back and just chip away some of those straight cuts you might have put in that glue at the top. But you can just peel away a bit there and add those as you need to. And again, remember, don't go too deep with those. You will end up into the interior of the barrier, which you don't want that cavity to show at all. So the last thing we're going to do here is just get the pencil. You could probably use a toothpick or something as well. And we're just going to add some cracks in here. It's not hard to do this. You probably want the finer point rather than a pen. I found it was a bit better. You can certainly add more pressure to get the deeper cracks, or you can start as a deep crack and then work it out to a slightly less defined crack. Moving out from the craters with some of these cracks will work really well. So just go through and add some of these. Honestly, it's just squiggly lines. Don't overthink it. You don't want to overdo it either. So add a bit here and there, but try not to go too overboard with the amount of details. Whether it's these cracks or some bullet holes, which we'll add in shortly. Just add a bit in first and find what you like. Add a bit, if you want more, go back, add a little bit more. It's all, you can't take these away once you put them on there. That's the thing. So now for the bullet holes, again, just make sure whatever you're using to poke through the foam here isn't going to poke right through to the inside of it. So I've just backed off my pencil there a little bit so it doesn't go in too deep. I don't really know what I'm doing here, so you just add them as you think they'll look good. Here I've just used the pencil for some thin, some small bullet holes. We'll go back shortly with a slightly bigger pen and add some larger holes. So with this, again, just be careful as you poke this into the foam. Think about where you want to put them. I just push it in and just wiggle it around a little bit just to widen the outside of the hole. Do that on both sides, and as you can see, that's starting to really look good now. Thank you guys for those that have subscribed so far. I hope you've liked the videos. I know the quality hasn't been great, but hopefully you've been able to get something out of the content. Feel free to go back and have a look at the videos. We've made those little ammo crates you can see at the top of the video there, and also the shipping containers. They're also very easy, simple tools. So I'll put a link to some of those, but check them out. Now my camera did cut out here, but I did want to show you one last step I took on these, which was just to work on the top here. Just a round object, just slowly rubbing it over the top. We'll bring those corners down. You can see on this one here it still has the sharp edges. All you got to do is just rub this along just to round it out a bit. If you've got unmatched bits of foam on the top, you can also press down with this and flatten them out a little. So once you've done that, you're pretty much ready to go with the final step, which for me before painting was just simply adding the wash. So I'll skip through here and get this done. As you can see, I've got them both done. One is slightly larger than the other. That's just because when I cut them, I was a little bit loose with those measurements on one of them, but it doesn't really matter. Again, practice, see what you like, see what fits with your terrain. And now this is just my just some Mod Podge with a little bit of black paint and some water. It's not very thick, it's quite runny. I'll just try and show you here on the cardboard. It just drips off the brush, so it's quite watery. It's about equal parts probably, Mod Podge and water, and then just you only need a few drips of the black paint to get it to be quite dark. So I'm just going to go and really put this all over it. You see some of that glue there is still not dry, but it's not so wet that it's going to rub off as we paint on here, so it's fine to go. This will be our last step. We're just going to really cover these with this Mod Podge and leave them outside to dry. I left these ones out for probably an hour or so, and you'll see that you'll be ready to start applying paint, and these will be nice and strong. They're pretty good. I haven't had any problems with mine, and I've been throwing them around the table for a good week or so now. So as you can see, these are all done. Make sure you get in all the little holes that you've made as well, because the foam board can be a little bit shiny, so you don't want anything of that showing through at the end. So make sure you get all that. And as I said, to get the effect I did, all you got to do is these three colors just at different mixes. So my black and white, just to make different shades of grey to slowly go up from a dark to a lighter. This is by no means a professional paint job, as you can tell, but I think you can certainly make these work on your table. So thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. I hope to have another couple of videos out soon. So head over and check out my other videos, and I'll see you soon. Thanks guys.